Hey, hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you're all doing fine out there. I'm doing much better than in my last episode that I recorded here on my channel. I could hardly speak at the time, and I've basically been off for a week, and I'm getting there to my normal self, but you have to excuse my nasal voice in this episode, my more than usual nasal voice in this episode it might be. Anyhow, we left November behind us, so that means it's yet another month to look back on that fantastical year in music that was 1984. I've been doing these retrospectives since January this year, just to celebrate 40 years since that fantastical year 1984. And in these episodes I look back on what I was listening to growing up as a 13-year-old boy in Sweden. And back then, to get the most of the newest music that was coming out, we were listening to a program that was on every Saturday on Swedish radio called Tracks. Yeah, Tracks. That was a great program on every Saturday. Played a bunch of new singles each week, and we got to vote on the top 20 list that they also had for every week. And it's that top 20 list that I'm going to go through today, like I've done in every other retrospective. And on this occasion, it's from the 24th of November 1984. That was the last show for Tracks in November in 1984. So that's what I'm focusing on. And I'm also going to have a look at some honorable mentions from the UK charts at the same time period. There was some singles that were never being played on Tracks back in the day. So no time to waste. Let's kick things off now with a look back on what I was listening to back in November of 1984. And I got my trusted 1984 notebook here to help me keep things in check during these retrospectives. This is where I have all my lists from all these retrospectives. So if you ever find me looking down here, it's because I'm looking at this one. Yeah, lifesaver it is when it comes to these charts or these episodes. Yeah, so now let's have a look on what was playing on Swedish radio, more specifically on the Tracks program on the 24th of November 1984. And we'll start on the bottom of that list. On number 20, we find a group that I talked quite a lot about during these retrospectives throughout the year. And that is, of course, Scritti Politti. This time around with a third single from 1984, Hypnotize. Really good one. I loved all the singles they released at the time. I was just in love with Scritti Politti and the perfect pop as I see it today. Very sample heavy things going on here, intertwined with some funky guitars, and of course the unmistakable voice of Green Guardside as well on main vocals. It's angelic, very high-pitched voice. What do you call it? Anyhow, perfect. Just perfect. I love Green Guardside's voice. And you know, this was just a couple of nuggets they released in 1984. A taste of what's to come in 1985 when they released their beautiful, perfect pop album, Cupid and Psych 85. And yeah, it's just perfection. But unfortunately, the Swedish listening public wasn't too fond of Scritti Politti. None of the singles stayed very long on any charts. We've gone through some Poporama charts earlier this year, and even on Tracks. They didn't last long at all, unfortunately. But I was in love with them from the first time I heard Would Be. Yeah, so this one stayed for 2 weeks on the track chart with a peak positioning of number 19, unfortunately. Yeah, so just a last couple of words on this one. This is, of course, the maxi single I'm holding in my hand, or the 12-inch if you want. And as you can see on the hype sticker, it says it's a long version, but you get more than that on this one, actually. And it also says free poster, and within parentheses, of green. So it's not the whole band, Scritti Politti, it's just Green. Was he Scritti Politti? Was they it's just session musicians, it's called. There you go. There's some Swedish for you in this episode. Anyhow, I think it was a full band, right? But of course, Green Guardside was the standout character in this band, not only with his beautiful voice, but also the heartthrob of the band. So of course you're going to get a poster of Green in this one. But unfortunately, I checked. There's no poster in this one. I remember there was a poster, of course, when I bought this one back in the 80s. But it's lost in time. I don't know what happened to it. I can't remember having it on my bedroom wall or anything like that. So it must have fallen out at some point, or who knows. Anyhow, back to the versions. It says it's a long version of this one, but if we pull it out, we could see that there is Hypnotize long and Hypnotize short. And you also get Hypnotize version, and I think the one that they call version is the one referred to on the back here, where it says mixed by Gary Langen of Art of Noise and so many other things fame. Great mix of that one. I loved all the 12-inch mixes they did for the different singles in 1984. Very, like I said, very innovative sound with all the sampling, and of course Gary Langen must have been very familiar with that one coming from the Art of Noise, among other things. But yeah, that was Scritti Politti in number 20. And now on to number 19, and now it's where I look down here because I have to go to my notes and read out that The Alarm was in number 19. The Alarm, yes, a group that I've heard of quite a lot throughout the years. I saw their records in record stores at the time and still see them pop up from time to time, but never really listened to The Alarm, which is a shame because this one, the chant, or the chant has just begun, I think is the full title, but in some places I could see it being referred to just the chant. Anyhow, I really like this one. I don't know what I imagined The Alarm sounding like in my head, but it wasn't like this. It's a very good song, and I like the voice. I had to read up on this one. His name is Dave Sharp. And what a voice, very powerful voice, and a great song overall with very good lyrics to it as well, which at the time when I heard this one as a 13-year-old in Sweden, like so many other English lyrics, would just flew right over my head. But it's all about being in a recession and standing up for yourself and fight the power and all of that, basically. And it's very fitting to the timeline we are living in as well at this point. So I think this could be re-released today and it will still work really well lyric-wise, and of course song-wise as well. It's great song. I really was surprised by this one. But like I said, I don't know what I imagined The Alarm was going to sound like, but yeah. Anyhow, unfortunately, this was the only time it was played on tracks. It only stayed this week on tracks, and it peaked here in number 19, which is a shame. It's a good song. Go out and listen to it if you haven't heard it yet. Yeah, so, well, anyhow, we'll move on to number 18, and this is a familiar voice and a face. This is Huey Lewis and the News, if this is it. And I remember this one, loved it back in the day, and now listening back to it today, I can't help but just loving it. It's a great song. They take on a bit of doo-wop sound in this one, a bit of a melancholic sound, but at the same time it's very upbeat, and that's probably what I always associate Huey Lewis and the News with, because I don't have Huey Lewis and the News in my collection, but I could have, because I do appreciate a lot of the singles that I heard throughout the years, and what I do associate with them with, like, you know, with The Power of Love, for example, or I Want a New Drug, or this one, if this is it. it's all very upbeat, but when you listen to the lyrics on this one, for example, it's all about a girl basically leaving him, heartbreak and all of that. So yeah, the melancholy is there, like I said, but at the same time it's a bit of upbeat one, and I love those kind of songs. It's like what first came into my mind when I was listening back to this one was what were they called, Isley Brothers. This Old Heart of Mine from back in the late 60s. It's another very upbeat song, but it's all about a heartbreak and not getting the girl that you want and all of that. So yeah, it just reminded me of that. But yeah, like I said, I never had anything against Huey Lewis and the News. They got a knack for doing these kinds of songs, and I love the voice of Huey Lewis as well. Really, really good. Good pop song, like I wrote here in my notes, because when I sit back and listening to these ones, I usually take some notes, and I said here in big, bold letters, good pop song, and very catchy, of course, if this is it. And it went well, it went down very well, I would say, with the Swedish listening public as well. On the track chart, it stayed for 5 weeks with the peak positioning on number 4. And like I said, I do remember this one vividly, and I did have it on some of my mixtapes as well. Played it quite a lot. Then we move to the number 17 spot on this tracks list, and there we'll find a controversial single. I can't remember this one being very controversial in Sweden, but I might remember things wrong. But I do remember in some other European countries, here in the UK, for example, it was very controversial. I'm talking about Depeche Mode and Blasphemous Rumours. Yes. Great track taken from the album they released the same year, The Some Great Reward. And this was the 3rd single from that album. Yeah, and it caused an outcry. I think mainly from Christians or the churches in the different countries that were opposing to this one, because if you listen to the lyrics, Martin Gore, who wrote the lyrics, and Dave Gahan that is singing it, is casting some doubt on whether God exists or not, and if he does he care, and all of that. Very controversial, of course. Every time you mix religion with anything, it's going to get controversial. But it doesn't take away a great song with what I think is great lyrics, great message in this one. But it was so controversial, so Mute Records actually released it as a double A-side. I'm of course holding the 12-inch here in my hand, but you do get the other track here, which is Somebody from the same album, Some Great Reward. And they did a kind of a remixed variant of Somebody, or a version at least of that one. We would call it a remix. So it was a double A-side. At least here in the UK, if I'm not misremembering things. But in Sweden, it was Blasphemous Rumours, the A-side of this one. On this 12-inch, we also get 3 live tracks here as well, from Construction Time Again, 2 Minute Warning, and Everything Counts. And you also get Ice Machine, which was the original B-side of Dreaming of Me. From back in 1981 it was, I think. Yeah. So 3 great live tracks there, and Somebody in a new mix as well, and the brilliant Blasphemous Rumours, of course. This one was very popular in Sweden. Depeche Mode was very popular in Sweden at the time. So this one stayed for 6 weeks, peaking at number 7. Great single there from Depeche Mode. And in number 16 we have Chaka Khan. I Feel For You. What a single from Chaka Khan. Love this one. It might be overplayed in some people's opinion, but to me it can never be overplayed. I love it. Every time it comes on, it just brings big smile to my face and a really warm, fuzzy feeling in my heart. I love this one. And the first time I heard this one back in 1984, I fell in love with it. I just love the mix with Chaka Khan's great voice. You got some scratching in there and you got some rapping in there. I just loved it. Had no clue at the time it was actually Prince who wrote this one. I think he wrote it at least a year or two before this one. But Chaka Khan was given this song, or I don't know really the backstory around it. But she did a great job with it. And yeah, this was my introduction to Chaka Khan as well. Had no clue who she was at the time. Might as well been a new artist back in 1984. But the truth is, she's been active in the music industry for much longer than that. And since then, of course, I listened quite a lot to older Chaka Khan records and newer ones as well. She released quite a lot of good records throughout the years here, so yeah. But this is a standout single for me, I Feel For You. And of course, once again, this is a 12-inch I'm holding in my hand. So you get a remix on the A side, you get an instrumental dub version on the B side, and also a track called Chinatown. Funnily enough, with a lot of Prince songs that were given to other artists, he's not credited anywhere on the sleeves. He didn't want to like promote this is a Prince song. No, we have to pull out the record itself to read on the label. It says, I Feel For You, Prince. Yeah, that's what it says, if you can read it. Yeah, so, but yeah, eternally grateful that Prince gave this song away. I heard his rendition as well on, what was that album called? Originals, that came out a couple of years ago, which I really appreciated as a Prince fan. But I want to say that Chaka Khan's rendition of I Feel For You is so much better. Yes. That's what I have to say about this one. This one, unfortunately, just spent 2 weeks on the track chart with the peak positioning of number 16. I can't believe it, because once again, this is another track where when I look back on it, if I hadn't been doing these retrospectives and actually do some research for these ones, and someone came up to say, oh, Chaka Khan, I Feel For You, that was a huge hit for her in Sweden. Oh yeah, it probably was on the charts for 6 weeks or something like that, if I had my say. That's to my recollection. But the truth is, it only stayed for 2 weeks on the track chart. Probably stayed quite a bit longer on the selling charts, but yeah. Another surprise, unfortunately just 2 weeks. The next one in number 15, we talked about this one before, Numero Uno. And Tora. Was it Tora as well? So it was 3 Toras in this one. Doesn't matter. I talked quite a lot about this one and the fact that I don't really like this song at all. Perhaps back in the day I would have appreciated it, but it hasn't aged very well. And I don't think... Yeah, anyhow, we're not going to talk more about that one. I already said this before, but I have to say it again. It stayed for 5 weeks. I can't believe it stayed longer than Chaka Khan. Peaked at number 6. What is this about? Tora with Numero Uno. Yeah, let's move on to number 14 instead on this track chart. We have a new entry with Eurythmics and the title of the track for this year, 1984, Sex Crime. This is, of course, the album I'm holding in my hand, which functioned as the soundtrack of the film of the same name, 1984, based on George Orwell's novel, of course. But this was the Eurythmics take on the score here, and they did score a big hit there with Sex Crime 1984. A huge hit for them around Europe, at least. And then they also released Julia from this one, another great song. And I think that's it from that. Or was Ministry of Love released as a single as well? I should have checked this one before, but I think it could have been the B-side for Julia. Anyhow, 2 great singles from this one, but the greatest one in my book is Sex Crime 1984. Another song that I was blown away by when it was released, when I first heard it, which was probably here on the Tracks program in November. What else can I say? They did a brilliant job with this one, and they also used the newfangled technology with Sex Crime, sampling Annie Lennox's voice there in a couple of places. I was over the moon when I heard this one, and it's still being played quite a lot by me. Whenever I want to listen to a Eurythmics song, I usually take this one out. I have to get, and I thought I had the single in my collection, but there is a 12-inch of this one, which is a great 12-inch mix, and I have to get my hands on that one. Because when I was researching for this episode, I went through my Eurythmics records, and I was like, oh, it should be here somewhere. But it's not. I must have dreamt it. But I do remember having the album, and lo and behold, here it was, 1984. A good soundtrack, by the way. But this one, another surprise for me, because in my mind, this one was big hit, just like Chaka Khan, but it only stayed for 3 weeks with a peak positioning of number 14. Oh, my mind is deceiving me. When it comes to 1984 at least. Number 13 on this track chart, we'll find Jim Diamond. Yeah. That was a bell that rang when I heard the name, not only of the singer, Jim Diamond, but also the title. So when I put it on, I was like, oh, yes, it's that one. One of the classic ballads of the day. Great voice, sweet ballad, but oh, so boring. I always found this one really boring for some reason. And it's not like it's a bad production or anything. I already said that. Jim's got a great voice, and it's a sweet song, but I can't really stand it. And back in the day, I remember it was a bit of a cross-generation thing. Some kids loved it, but mainly it was our parents that were listening to this one and just loving it. And yeah. But it did get some love on the track chart. It stayed for 3 weeks, peaking at number 13. Let's move on to number 12 on this chart. And we got the supergroup Toto in this spot. And Toto, of course, we got a lot of great hits in the 80s. To my mind, Africa. What was the other one? Roseanne. Yeah. It's one of those bands. I never really hated them, never really loved them. It's just something I heard on the radio, saw the videos a couple of times, that kind of band. So when I saw this one, Stranger in Town, even when I listened back to it, I couldn't really remember this one. But it does have an interesting opening. It's got this pulsing bass synth on it. I was like, oh, this could lead up to something really nice. And you got this voice as well going along with this bass sound, like wow, wow, wow. It's very mysterious. You're like, where is this taking us? And it's taken us straight into normal Toto territory, or whatever you want to call it. Sounds like much of the other songs that they had when it goes to the chorus and all of that, but at some point it goes back to that synth bass again, and I find that really interesting, but that might just be me. But very competent. Listening back to this one, a very tight band, great voice for this one and all of that, so I have nothing to say about the production quality. It's all stellar on this one. I was more mesmerized by the video, because when I listen back to the songs here for my retrospectives, I usually go to YouTube, because if there's a video that comes along with said song, I usually go for that one, just to see what the video was like. And this one really captured me. It's about the fugitive back in the 30s, 1930s or something like that, who knows? All shot in black and white, and with Brad Dourif in the lead role as the fugitive in this one. And it looks like it's been played out in somewhere down in the south in USA. But at the end of the video, he's captured by the police from a barn where he's hiding out. Some kids have helped him hiding out there. But the police have these tall policeman hats, where you can see here in the UK, English policemen have. So I was a bit confused. Did the police in the USA ever had these hats? I'm not sure. I don't think so. But in this video, they do have that. Or is it meant to be being played out in the UK, because the surroundings doesn't look anything like the UK? So it was a bit perplexing, but I found the video interesting. Not only because Brad Dourif was in it, but yeah, interesting video. This one was taken, I also had to read up a bit on Toto here. It's taken from the album that they had out at the time, Isolation, which was a hit for them back in the day. On the track chart, however, it only stayed for 3 weeks. Well, I say only. We had songs here that I thought were greater than this one that only stayed for 2 weeks. But yeah, this one stayed for 3 weeks with a peak positioning of number 12. So good job on Toto there, and Stranger in Town. The next entry here in number 11 is something I really love. It's Pat Benatar and the single We Belong. Yeah, you might not think that I was a huge Pat Benatar fan back in the day, and you're right. I wasn't. Pat Benatar is something that I grew fond of in the later years, really. I remember having this one on a mixtape, and I think Love is a Battlefield as well, and a couple of other ones, but I wasn't a huge fan. But when I started listening more to Pat Benatar in later years, I discovered what a great singer she is and what great tracks she made beside the singles I just mentioned. And this one, of course, being a huge single back in the day, I just had to get this one when I saw it in a secondhand shop not long ago. We Belong, and this one, as someone might have spotted already, is the 85 issue of this single, but it originally came out in 1984. And it's one of those great songs that it's very cleverly produced. It starts out very slow with basically just some twinkling on a piano or guitar, and the powerful voice of Pat Benatar going on. And she builds up to something, and sure enough, it all breaks loose with bombastic drums for the chorus. And after that's done, they just pull everything down again, strip it down as it was, down to this, just her voice and one or two instruments. And it's so effectful and a great song. I shouldn't really love something like this, but I do. I love the production of it and Pat Benatar's voice as well. And I think a lot of now being more acquainted with Pat Benatar and her career, she started out having a more rockier sound, heavier sound even on her earlier records. But is this where she really found her niche? Because from this point on, in the early 80s or mid 80s, she just continued doing more pop music and less rock. So it might, I suspect, divided a lot of Pat Benatar fans at the time, changing so radically to what she was doing at this point from what she was doing earlier in her career. But I do appreciate both eras, so to say, or all her eras, really. She's done some really good music. I got some of the earlier albums as well, and I do think it's really great. So another good one, and this one spent 4 weeks on the track charts, peaking at number 11, and that's Pat Benatar's We Belong. Great song. And then in number 10 we have an old acquaintance here. It's of course George Michael and Careless Whisper, and I talked about this one before, how brilliant of a song this is, one of the 80s classics and all of that. So I'm just going to say it stayed for 13 weeks, peaking at number 3 on the track charts in 1984. Really, really good one. And the same goes for the next one. I mentioned this one in my previous retrospectives, Paul McCartney's No More Lonely Nights. This is where I discovered Paul McCartney as a solo artist and all of that. And if you want to hear more about my rantings about Paul McCartney and the brilliance of Paul McCartney as a solo artist, you have to go back and look at my other retrospectives. But this one stayed for 7 weeks, I'm glad to say, and peaked at number 3. This one as well. And in number 8 on this track chart from the 24th of November 1984, we find the heartthrob from Sweden, Niclas Wahlgren. Yeah, I've been talking about Niclas Wahlgren here before because he charted with a couple of singles earlier that year. And now he's back with a single called I natt, or roughly translated, Tonight. I can't remember what I actually said about the other Niclas Wahlgren singles, but it's your standard fare when it comes to 1984. It sounds very much of its time, and you could say that with many singles, but this one doesn't really have a catchy hook to it, nothing like that. And what I can remember, at least from was it called Sommarnatt, Summer Night, or something like that? He had earlier that year. We talked about that one. At least that one's got a really catchy chorus. But this one, the lyrics seems really forced on this one. And I know if you go out and listen to this one and you don't have Swedish as your first language, or you don't understand Swedish, you can't really tell. But the rhymes doesn't really match up if they are rhyming even. I don't know. It just seems very forced, and that also shows in his voice as well. It seems very forced when he sings it. It takes a bit of a toll on his voice, and this is, I have to say, he's not only a heartthrob, he actually has got a great singing voice as well. But in this one, ooh, yeah, he was fighting the song on this one. So not a great one in my book. It did stay for 3 weeks in the track charts and peaking at number 7. Very forgetful pop in my book. So let's move on to number 7 on this track chart. And there we'll find Ultravox and Love's Great Adventure. This one is called. It's not one of the great Ultravox songs, because I do appreciate Ultravox and especially Mitchell's voice as well. I always love that. This is not one of the greats and it's not one of the bads. It's just mid for me, really. Good song, good pop song, really. So I'm not going to drag this out. If I don't have anything useful to say, I'm just going to move on, and that's what I'm going to do here. Good pop song from Ultravox, Love's Great Adventure. Spent 6 weeks in the track charts and peaking at number 7. So once again, I might have been alone and thinking this one was a bit, middle of the road, because a lot of people loved it. 6 weeks. Yeah, that's good. In number 6, we'll find another great artist from the 80s, Rick Springfield, and with the very silly title, Bop Till You Drop. I can't help by smiling every time. It's such a silly title. But what a song. This one, as soon as I put it on, I was like, yeah, I remember this one. And it is a good pop. Good pop song. It is really, really good. Very catchy, with a very notable bass line, like slap bass, funky bass line there, and a great voice from Rick Springfield. He always had a really great voice. I really, really liked this one. Very, very catchy. And what really catch my eye as well was the video for this one, which I think I never saw before. It's Rick Springfield in a futuristic setting or post-apocalyptic setting, but I think it's a futuristic setting because I think there's an alien going on there as well. That alien or the aliens have enslaved a bunch of people, and Rick Springfield is as our hero to save these people from the aliens. And lo and behold, I didn't know this one, but I saw it down in the comments for the video. It's David Fincher who directed this one, and according to what I could find on IMDb, it's his debut film work. He did a lot of music videos for Madonna, among so many others. I think he did for Michael Jackson as well, and so many others before he started doing his films, like, great films like Alien 3. And the reason I'm mentioning Alien 3 here is because this one is very reminiscent in the tone of the video. That earth colors, very brown, and there's an alien in it as well who enslaved people. In Alien 3, it's a prison colony, right, they come to. So yeah, it's very reminiscent. That David Fincher's debut work, and he did a great job with this one. It's a bit silly at times, They probably didn't have a huge budget for this one, but they did good job with what they had. So it's a bit tongue-in-cheek as well, I think. But yeah, great one. And of course, yeah, David Fincher went on to make more films than Alien 3. Fight Club, for example, and Panic Room as well is one of my favorites from him. And Seven, another great one. But we're not here to talk about David Fincher, but I was just so amazed that it was David Fincher's first video. Great song from Rick Springfield with a very silly title, Bop Till You Drop. Stayed for 4 weeks, peaked at number 6 on the track charts. Yeah, another one that I might pick up if I find it in secondhand. Really love that one. And then in number 5 on this track chart, we'll find a group that we've been acquainted to before, at least in our last retrospective. That's Kiss and Heaven's on Fire. This huge hit. I'm not a huge fan of this one, not this era of Kiss at least, but this one was really big. I remember this one from school. A lot of tough heavy metal kids were listening to this one. They thought it was great. 8 weeks it spent on the track chart with a peak positioning of number 4, so it was hugely popular on tracks as well. And then in number 4, another old acquaintance, Limahl with a never-ending story. What a huge one. Yet another song taken from a soundtrack in 1984. We had a lot of those going on. This one spent 10 weeks in the track charts and peaking at number 2. Great work there from Limahl. And once again, if you want to hear me reflect more on these these singles that's already been talked about here on my retrospectives, go back and look at my previous retrospectives. Yeah, that's it. Number 4, Limahl. Yeah, we have now reached the top 3 singles from this track chart from the 24th of November 1984. And in the number 3 spot, we'll find Duran Duran. And no, it's not the album Arena. It's The Wild Boys, which was included on Arena. Yeah, Wild Boys, or The Wild Boys, was a huge hit for them back in 1984, at least here in Europe. If you would have asked me back then in 1984, what is your favorite Duran Duran song? I would say, Wild Boys, of course. It was the Wild Boys. Loved the video, which was a bit of a Mad Max setting to it, with some freaky animatronic heads or whatever. That's what I can remember from it, at least. But yeah, I loved it back then. Over the years, me and the Wild Boys have grown apart a bit. I don't consider it one of the greatest tracks anymore. It's a bit dated nowadays. Not a lot of tracks. You can always say, well, it sounds very 80s or whatever for any song that's been produced at this point. But some of them seems more timeless than others. And Wild Boys is one of them that hasn't stood the test of time very well, in my opinion, at least. So, yeah. But yeah, back then, a great song, and stayed for 9 weeks on the track chart with a peak positioning of number 3. And yeah, great job there on Duran Duran. Good year for them. But I do prefer what they released the next year, in 1985, when they did the main title song for the new Bond film at the time, A View to a Kill. That is still a great song in my book. And before we leave this one, I want to say Arena as album was their new album at the time, a live album. Got accused by a lot of people being more or less a studio album more than a live album, because they made so many overdubs and polished it up in the studio, so it became more or less a studio album more than a live album. And I don't care really. I didn't care at the time either, because I love this album and I still think it's a really good live album. And a couple of years ago, I think it was for Record Store Day, they did release this particular concert. If I'm not mistaken, it was this concert which the tracks from Arena is taken from. They released that as a double album for Record Store Day, with a lot of additional songs as well. But the true live recording this time around, they probably did some polish up on that one as well, but not as much as on this one. And I would love to get my hands on that one. Never got my hands on that one a couple of years ago, but it's so pricey on the aftermarket. So I just hope and pray they will release it to the wider public at some point. I would love to pick that one up. But yeah, great one. Wild Boys, not so much today, but it was a huge success for them, like I said. In number 2 on this tracks list, we have a new entry for November. It's Murray Head and a track from a new musical called Chess. This is One Night in Bangkok. And oh my goodness, this was another favorite of mine, and I wasn't alone in thinking this. This was a huge hit, at least in Sweden. We got other hits from this musical as well, but I think it's in the following year, or was it in 1984? I Know Him So Well with Barbara Dixon and Elaine Page, for example. A lot of great songs from that musical, written by Björn and Benny, of course, from ABBA fame. This was their first musical after leaving ABBA, or ABBA splitting up. And it did premiere in 1984 as well, in West End in London, if I'm not mistaken. And this was one the pop song from that. Can we call it soundtrack? Yeah, we'll call it soundtrack from that musical Chess. Let's say that. Murray Head, wasn't too familiar with him since before. To me, he was a new artist at the time, but that was not really the case. He was not a veteran, but he's been in the music industry before. But what a job he did with this one, and the production. My goodness, it's good on this one. I love how they placed his voice in this song. It's there in your face, really. It's very dry and upfront, and it's very. I would describe it as a wall of sound, the rest of it, a wall of synthesizers, really. And it's such a great one. I think it has held up really, really well over the years. It's something I still appreciate listening to, but unfortunately not in my collection, so I can't show you it. But it was as usual, I'll have the picture here or there or somewhere of the original single cover, so you will see that. And like I said, huge hit in Sweden. It stayed 8 weeks in the track chart with a peak positioning on number 1. Yes, the track's number 1 single, lost for words there, is Alphaville and Forever Young, of course. This was, like I said so many times before, Alphaville's year. A huge year for them, with 3 top singles and a huge selling album as well, which was also called Forever Young. 11 weeks in the track charts and peaking at number 1. Yes, hugely, hugely popular. Well, that's nearly it for this penultimate, really hard word for a Swede to say, penultimate episode of this 1984 retrospectives. We just have 1 episode left, and that's looking back on December of course of 1984. But I have some goodies here. Usually I do some honorable mentions from the track charts as well for said month, but in November of 1984 I couldn't really find anything that wasn't really on the charts for the 24th of November that we already gone through. So I'm going to move on to the UK charts. And on the UK charts, the rule is, if I find anything as an honorable mention there, something that's near and dear to me, it has to be a single that was never being played on tracks. And I found a couple of nuggets here on the UK charts for November of 1984. The first one being Matt Bianco's wonderful single, Half a Minute. I talked quite a lot about Matt Bianco here on my retrospectives and my love for them, and I loved all the singles they released this year. And I used to have this single on a 7-inch, but it's no longer in my collection for some reason. So this one is sorely missing. I have to pick it up at some point, but I do have the album where it's included, so I'm not missing out really. Anyhow, this is another good one. I won't talking any length about Matt Bianco because I've been doing that in my previous retrospectives, but just a short summary. It's basically a blend of wonderful pop, bossa nova, jazz, and what the blender spits out is just wonderful music from Matt Bianco. And usually with a twist of a thriller in there, like Sneaking Out the Back Door, which was their previous single, or Whose Side Are You On, I think was their previous single, which is also a Cold War thriller in a pop format. I would say. Yeah, that's the best way I could describe it. With Half a Minute, though, it's more of a summary song. I always think of sunny days during the summer when I listen to this one. A very laid-back track that might have been a bit misplaced when it came to the release date of this one, because I think it came out in October at first and started charting in November. So, but it's something to warm you in the cold of a winter, perhaps. This summary tune of Half a Minute. I love this one, just like the previous ones. This one stayed for 10 weeks in the UK charts, peaking at number 23. So I'm really glad to see that. And then we have the other one, and I picked this one for my collection. This is Prefab Sprout, and this is, of course, the second album, Steve McQueen, which wasn't released until 1985. But a song from this one, When Love Breaks Down, was released as a single at this point in November of 1984. They did also release their debut album, Swoon, this year as well, 1984. But Love Breaks Down was the first track, the first taste of what's to come on the brilliant album Steve McQueen. So I just had to mention it here. I know it was re-released as a single in 1985 as well to coincide with the release of the new album, but it was actually released by Kitchenware Records in November of 1984 and did chart for 3 weeks and peaking at number 88 in the UK chart. So it wasn't huge back then, but it was going to get a resurgent in 1985 at least. So yeah, we have a reason to come back to the wonderful Prefab Sprout and the unmistakable pop of Prefab Sprout, I have to say. I never heard anything like it, but yeah, I'm going to talk more about Prefab Sprout in another episode. The next one we have is over here on my desk. It's this one. I recently talked about Bananarama in my greatest albums of 1984 when I praised their second self-titled album. And this Hotline to Heaven is one of the singles from that one. And it's the one that didn't chart that well. I have to say, it stayed for 3 weeks and only peaking at number 58 in the UK and never charted in Sweden either. Which is a bit surprising, I think, because I think all the singles from that album, and especially Hotline to Heaven, is a very catchy song, a very competent pop song as well. But hey, I'm biased, it's Bananarama. But yeah, that's Hotline to Heaven. And then we also have this one. I have all my records down here. I don't know why I didn't put them up. This is Bronski Beat, and I talked quite a lot about Bronski Beat here on my retrospectives before. Another great track from the album The Age of Consent. This is Ain't It Necessarily So, which is a cover of an older song by the same name. And this is probably, one of my favorite, if not the favorite from Age of Consent. I think it's brilliant. The voice of Jim Somerville is outstanding on this one. A really good rendition of Ain't It Necessarily So. So that's why I want to mention that one. I already talked about The Age of Consent and the brilliance of Bronski Beat. So once again, go and have a look at the previous retrospectives. And to finish things off here on a high note, I want to say, and also a bit of a low note here. Laura Branigan, the wonderful Laura Branigan, released Ti Amo as a single in November of 1984. Brilliant single taken from what you can see here on the back of it, Self-Control. Brilliant album. And Ti Amo, I think, is a standout track from that one. But I was one of the few who thought that one. But here comes the downer of this one. It only spent 1 week on the UK charts and peaked at number 100. It was on the bottom. People didn't really take notice of Ti Amo with Laura Branigan, but it is a good one. So an uplifting one. She entered the chart at least with Ti Amo, but the downer here is they only stayed for 1 week. But hey, that's the way it goes in the music industry. That's it for this penultimate episode of my 1984 retrospectives. I will be back soon, a bit earlier, I think, with the look back on December of 1984. But who knows? Some other episodes may come in the way, or I'll catch another cold. Who knows? Hopefully not. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, if you don't mind giving me a thumbs up and all of that, and if you do have something to comment about what I have discussed here and anything else, put it down in the comments as usual. Yeah, that's it. Now I'm gonna go and rest my voice once again, and until next time, you all take care of yourself, and as usual, I